turns out this is a whole discipline, right? This is a whole study of how people learn, how the mind works. And there's a lot of good evidence now out there that talks about how do we teach well. And as you all know, at any meeting where I stand up in front of you, I talk about our guiding principles, which the number one is?
Unshakable focus on student learning.
Very good, an unshakable focus on student learning.
Do I get a cookie?
Yes, wait, hold on. Do we get cookies?
No.
No cookies, sorry.
You can have celery sticks.
You're on your own
Chance for the positive reinforcement right there. That's the right thing to look at.
Behavioral.
As long as he likes
Everything I know about psychology I learned by raising service dog puppies.
She prefers the shock collar.
It's the same thing.
Yikes. Wow.
Is it a shot? Oh, he's okay. He's okay. All right, so with that, I'll turn over to Eric, Dr. Landrum.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. You've got my topic here. I've been here. I'm finishing my 23rd year at Boise State. Was another place 3 years before that. Probably the best place, if you know me at all, which is fine if you don't, trust me. But if you know me at all, you got an email from me on Wednesday offering me $10. So that's me. Hi, that's me. So help us out. Get $10 on your Bronco ID card. It's really my pleasure to be here. Here are just some. I'm going to start us off with some foundational ideas and some key questions to ask. And I would never come into this room or any other room on campus and try to tell anyone how to teach. Not my job, not my role. Teaching is personal. It's sometimes profound. It's private. It's solitary. And so I'm not here to tell anybody how to do something differently. But I am here to talk about a couple of foundational things this afternoon. And really, if we're going to make informed decisions about how students can learn from us, from our teaching, how do students learn? There is a literature on that. Amy alluded to it. There's actually entire disciplines that are devoted to this. Psychology is just one of many. So I want to talk to you a little bit this afternoon about some of the science of learning and how students learn. But then, to do that, we have to understand a little bit about brain and behavior. It's way too complicated a topic. I'm going to bore you with other things, but not that thing. All right? So that's kind of the plan for me. And so those are really the two foundations for me. If we want to make informed decisions about teaching, we ought to understand how students learn. Understand how students learn? We should understand a little bit about brain and behavior. So for me, key questions that maybe we'll start to think about, probably not answer, but start to think about by the time we're done this afternoon. What knowledge and skills do students need to possess? And I would ask you to think about this at multiple levels. So you can be very granular. So for faculty members giving an assignment, what do you want students to get out of that assignment by the time it's done? Or it could be, what do you want them to get out of the course? Or bigger and broader, more macro view would be, what do you want them to come away with at the end of their course of study and they've gained their bachelor's degree in engineering? So that's one question that will keep popping up today. Secondly, what's the most efficient or effective use of our educator effort? By the way, how many of you are faculty members in the room? How many students in the room? How many hate raising your hand in public? Okay, thank you. I know where the comedic center of the universe is now. It's out there in that corner. Thank you. I appreciate that. This might be hard to believe. I'm a researcher. I don't teach 100% of the time. I love doing research. I have an entire career built on psychological research, educational research. So I don't want to teach all the time. I enjoy it. I'm very passionate about it, but I need the balance. I need the balance of teaching, research, and service. And so when I do my teaching load, when I complete my tasks, I want to be as efficient and effective as possible. I don't want to waste a lot of time. I have other things to do. All right, so I want to be effective for my students, but also efficient for myself. My third question, and this is one I don't think we stop and talk about very often, and perhaps we should more often. How well do your students exhibit the desired knowledge or skills 1 year after completing their course? 5 years after the course. Have you ever played this game, walked in the first day of class, and asked students, tell me what you had last semester. Tell me what professors you had last semester. Tell me one thing you learned last semester. Try that sometime. It's depressing. I mean, it really is. And I'm not talking about just in engineering. I'm talking about with my psychology majors. Okay? And sometimes they had me last semester, they had me this semester. That's even worse, right? When you have them back to back, right? But these are, I'm guessing we're passionate about what we're teaching, and hopefully for our students what you're learning. But wouldn't it be good if they remembered something from your course a year after it happened? I'm pretty sure engineering in all its various flavors has prerequisites that lead up to later courses. And if you're the teacher of the later course, you're probably thinking, what did they do in that prerequisite course? They're coming in unprepared. They can't do that stuff. You had this in, I'm sorry, I don't know your course numbers. You had this in 295. How dare you come into 321 and not be, well, guess what? Oftentimes we don't design our courses in such a way to help students remember things a year later, 5 years later. But I can tell you about how to do that. I can share with you the science of learning and tell you data-based, empirically based, how we might do that. Okay, so we've got to start with the definition of learning. Here's what I want you to do. Just really briefly, within reach, with pairs or trios, I want you to take 1 minute. And I want you to talk about, if you're going to do a definition of learning, what would it be? By the way, no screens. So no electronic devices, no Google it, all right? Brain power. Make eye contact, talk to somebody for 1 minute, and come up with a definition of learning, and I'll have you report out just a couple of them. If you would, please. I hate to interrupt you, and I hate to interrupt your great conversations, but I'm going to. Right? We don't have time to hear from everybody who just had this discussion, but I'd love to hear a couple of your definitions of learning. That is with brain power only, not using a screen or an electronic device.
Which level are you talking about?
Oh! Okay, we've met, all right? And so, give me a definition of learning, please.
The process of gaining new knowledge, skills, and or abilities.
I like it, the process of gaining new knowledge, skills, or abilities. Sure, how about on this side? Somebody over here.
We had a similar definition, but then started exploring about that it should be, for lack of a better word, sticky. Right? That it hangs around. It's not transient.
And like it. So it's relatively permanent, perhaps. There's some stickiness to it. I'll go one more. One more. Yes, please. Yeah, the shy side.
Examples. If I say that I learned fishing, how to fish, how to fly fish, I would only say that I learned it by able to catch a fish.
Nicely. So you'd like someone to be able to demonstrate the behavior, not just say in a self-referred.
You obviously don't understand fly fishing.
I didn't think the point of fly fishing was to catch fish. So maybe I just understand. Catch and release. There you go. So if I were teaching that intro psych course, Psych 101, I might use a definition like this: a relatively permanent change in behavior due to experience. We can come back someday and have a cute little debate about what that really means. If we looked it up in Merriam-Webster, the online dictionary, we might find that definition, which sounded a lot like knowledge, skills, and abilities. No one had an incorrect definition. I like this one. It's by Robert Bjork at UCLA, a psychologist. A little bit more wordy, because that's what we do. The ability to use information to solve problems that arise in different contexts, even if only slightly, from the context in which the information was originally taught. In cognitive psychology, we have a term for this. It's called transfer. And I think we, as educators, we hope for this, right? Students are sitting in our classrooms, they're in our labs, and eventually they're going to be able to transfer this not only to future courses, but maybe to employment, maybe to the world of work, maybe to their first job after they get their bachelor's degree. And so that is a huge leap, and we don't often see that. Here's a classic. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to let you read it. Classic story. This happens a lot. That students don't extract the underlying principles but they have the rote memorization of the exact problem with the exact formula phrased in the exact same way. And if you don't use the same words in the same order, the same sequence, it tosses students up. And we don't want that for our students. As educators, we certainly don't want that outcome. And honestly, it's our fault sometimes. Okay? I teach in a sequence in psychology of statistics followed by research methods. And I realize at times that I am handcuffing my students when I spoon feed them. It's really complicated. I want them to do well. I want them to build success and self-esteem and all that good stuff. But if I spoon feed them too much, if I handhold too much, they won't be able to figure it out on their own later. Okay? The world of work does not provide a syllabus. In the world of work, there's no extra credit. Sometimes we do our students a disservice. Even though they're asking for extra credit and we give it to them, sometimes that's a disservice to them. And I would just encourage you to think about that. I'm not telling you what to do. But just think about what the ultimate goals are, that transfer from classroom to workplace to life. So, a little bit about the science of learning. There's a lot here. I've taught an entire course called Learning. Right? We don't have time for that. I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't want to underwhelm you. I just want to whelm you. Right? I just want to give you a touch of it, a tidbit of it. If you want more information, not only am I going to share this PowerPoint, but I will share all the reference citations that are embedded into it. So if you want to go and read the articles, good for you. You've got time for that. You must be a full professor. All right? Good for you. You've got time. But I will share everything, all the details. So a little bit about the science of learning. It's incredibly complex. We can't give it its justice in an hour session together. There's all kinds of complex factors that comprise learning, that affect learning outcomes. Here's a brief list of it. I can't even go through each and every one and give it its due. So I'm going to pick one. This notion of attention and multitasking. Students highly overestimate their abilities to multitask. Guess what? Students are human. Humans highly overestimate their ability to multitask. So if you're a faculty member and you're sitting in a department meeting and you're looking at your cell phone, you are not any better at multitasking than students sitting in your classroom who are also looking at their cell phones and multitasking. All right? We're not good at it, although we think we are. That's called overconfidence. I'll come back to that one. Right? So we're just not. I don't know if you've seen this or not. And I don't know if the audio is going to play, but the audio is not that important. But I just wanted to give you one demonstration of that. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. So there's usually audio, but actually it doesn't really matter for us. How many passes? White players to white players only. White shirted players. Let me be more careful about that. Thank you. 17, 15, I hear 14, 16. The answer is 15. Good for you, but keep watching. Did you see the gorilla?
Yes.
So honestly, the first time through, did you see the gorilla? Yeah. So if you're good for you, because you probably saw that on YouTube.
Yes, I've seen it before.
Because you're probably a professional. Right, you've got time for this shit. But here's the thing. If you're concentrating on one task and you're really watching the people in the white shirts passing the basketball, a gorilla can walk through, stomp its chest, keep walking, and you don't even report seeing it. So trust me, all the research is out there. It's really quite good. It's David Sprayer in Utah about divided attention. So if you have a hands-free Bluetooth device, you are just as likely to get into an accident. You know, if I'm not holding a phone up to my ear, but I'm watching this display, you're just as likely to have an accident. in the automobile. So we are not good at multitasking. No matter what we might believe we can do. So, so I'm just going to touch on a couple of these science of learning. And this is great. This is from a guy named Moulton at Harvard, and he did a nice job summarizing it. You can see there's little footnotes in here, but he wrote a really nice summary. So I've stolen, with credit, some of his summaries to just chat with you about. There's not a lot of these. So massed versus spaced practice. Generally speaking, students will do better at retention if they space the practice over time. Okay? So a student has, I'm going to study 4 hours on Saturday. I'm going to study for my thermo exam. And 4 hours on Sunday, I'm going to study for my Calc 3 exam. Are those in the ballpark of anything realistic? Okay, thank you. All right? So what the literature tells us is that that's probably not the best. A better strategy would be to interleave. So 2 hours Saturday on thermo, 2 hours Saturday on Calc 3, 2 hours a Sunday on thermo, 2 hours on Sunday on Calc 3. It would be better to interleave those. Even better yet, spacing. If you want someone to recall something a week from now, your study sessions should be spaced 1 day apart. If you want someone to recall something a year from now, it should be about a month apart. Okay? So if you want someone to remember something 1 year later after your course, they should be revisiting it about once a month in that 4.5-month semester. Also, you can see some of the advice up here. Cumulative exams can help. Because students study for a month, take a test, and you're done with it, right? And if you don't come back to it, students are done with it too. Okay? Because, and that makes sense a lot of times the way we teach. They never teach that way in world languages. You're never done with the nouns before you move on to the verbs. You're always building on prior content knowledge. And so there's some really interesting things there. By the way, let's just mention for a moment cramming. Right? Cramming in the short term, for short-term retrieval, it works. College students in the room know that. By the way, every professor in the room knows that too, because they did it too. Okay? They may not remember it, but they did it too. Especially for their non-engineering classes. And trust me, they did it. All right? And you might even admit it, and I appreciate that, John. And so if you want to remember a lot of information for a short amount of time, a big cramming session just before works. But if you want that student to remember anything a week later, it doesn't work. Okay? So the way we test and structure our courses can hopefully positively influence the way students are learning. Here's another one. Here's the second one, retrieval practice. Tested comprehension and inference. This is good stuff. So the way textbooks are structured can have an impact. So students highlighting in their book may be the most useless strategy on the planet. Okay? Because they need to re-engage with the material on a personal level. It's much better for students to write their own exam questions and then take their own exam. It's called the testing effect. Right? So reviewing, highlighting, rereading is relatively useless. Okay? But a student will come in and say, look at all the stuff I highlighted. I worked on this for hours. And they think they were studying. I suppose on some level they were, but not efficiently. Not efficiently. It's much better to have frequent low-stakes assessments than a midterm and a final for these high-stakes assessments. It's much better in terms of retrieval practice. Here's another one. I've got a buddy of mine in Wisconsin who's done this study. In a textbook, the key terms in glossary hurts students. It hurts, because here's what happens. Students are busy. They got a lot of stuff going on. You're going to read the 40-page chapter, or you're going to read the 3-page glossary. And they're not going to get any of the context and the storytelling the author told in his or her textbook. But they're going to skip to the chase, memorize the terms, and you're hoping there's no cumulative exams, right? Because that way you won't have to remember anything past the thing that you're cramming for. And so there are principles here that we can apply in our courses. Here's another one called desirable difficulties. This one's harder to do. you need to gauge, sometimes it's called the Goldilocks principle, not too cold, not too warm, but just right. You need to engage students in tasks that are doable, that are challenging, they're not easy, they're not impossible. You gotta find that sweet spot in between. Okay, desirable difficulties. I love this example. Relatively advanced students actually learn more when reading an introductory text that's slightly incoherent, because they are forced to make sense of it for themselves. That's exactly what we want students to do. Make sense of the world for themselves. To figure it out. Not to be spoon-fed, to memorize and regurgitate, but to figure it out. Rewrite it would be even better. You know. And this is that kind of thing of getting students ready for that shift from college to career. You know, if we spoon-feed them everything, they're in for culture shock in that first job. They're in for real culture shock. This one applies to all of us, obviously. The curse of knowledge. I love the first sentence. I'll let you read it. I wish I had written it, but I didn't. There are faculty members in this room who are world-class experts in their fields. They spend a career developing this expertise. Just because you're a world-class researcher does not necessarily equate to a good teacher. They can overlap, they certainly can, but they're not synonymous. And I think if you think back to your graduate school experiences, faculty members, you probably had courses with amazingly intelligent men and women who were the best in their field, but who could not teach their way out of a paper bag. Okay? It's a different skill set. That Venn diagram might overlap a little bit, but I'm not sure how much. And so sometimes we have a hard time translating the most basic ideas. My father was in the Navy for 26 years. He didn't graduate from high school. He was an electronics technician. I can remember him at the dining room table with a circuit board and a soldering iron. Okay? True story. Now, I'm a little kid, and I'm pointing at, well, what's that? He says, that's a capacitor. Well, what does that do? And I said, what's that? Well, that's a resistor. Well, what does that do? He had a really hard time telling me that, because he couldn't translate it into a language I would understand as a kid. And I remember him remarking, wow, I can't believe it's so hard for me to explain this, because I really know what this is. Just because he knew it, just because he had expertise in it, didn't mean he could explain it to others. Okay? So we have this curse of knowledge. So sometimes we think, oh, that should be easy. How come you don't understand that? That's an easy concept. That's basic. Well, that's because we're experts at it. We've been studying it for 20 or 30 years. It is easy to us. It may not be easy to someone who's new to the topic. For faculty members, this is somewhat of a joke, maybe not, maybe it is. When you get a new cell phone, right? And when you get everything transferred to the old cell phone, who do you seek out? Your children, right? Because it's very frustrating. All these new features, and I can't really figure this out. How come it can't be easier? Well, something that's very over-practiced and easy for them is difficult for a novice. I think we forget that sometimes as faculty members. I know I do. I'll put it that way. Last one from the science of learning. Overconfidence. And this one hurts students in a couple of different ways. And so students, generally speaking, it's the Lake Wobegon, right? They think everybody's above average. They think they're doing better than they think they are. And if they don't have relatively frequent feedback about that, so that's going to happen. So here's what happens. So there's something in the metacognitive literature called termination of effort, right? And so a student is studying, you're writing a paper, you're studying for a test, whatever, and the student has to gauge, when do I quit studying? Termination of effort. When do I stop studying? And if you're overconfident, you stop studying earlier. So you study less, you think you know it, you show up, and maybe you did know it, maybe you didn't know it. Faculty members can help students kind of resolve that by giving them infrequent, low-stakes assessments, where they're keeping up to date on what they know and what they don't know, as opposed to this midterm and a final where everything is on the line. All right? And so that would be one of the principles here from the science of learning. And there's so many more, but I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there, but there's so much more to this. So, 3. This funny acronym that maybe you've heard some of your colleagues talk about. Evidence-based instructional practices. So you got the science of learning literature that's telling us about how people learn, not just students, but everyone, how people learn. You've got another literature over here telling us about what are the teaching techniques, the pedagogical principles that we have evidence for, that we know from studies, multiple studies that help people learn, and now we can connect the two. Okay? Now we can connect the two with evidence-based instructional practices. So we have compendiums now, where you don't want to go out and read 1,000 journal articles. There are people writing these books about this, that you can get them in short snapshots. All kinds of people in the literature have asked this question. It's a good question to ask. Be skeptical. Don't just accept it on face value because someone told you it's out there. Where's the evidence that active learning works? And there are articles like this one. There's articles like this one from a faculty member in chemical engineering. Does it really work? You might have to actually experiment in your classroom to convince yourself. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, think about it. Next fall, you're teaching 2 sections of the same course. Leave your assessments alone. Active learning in one course. Your regular, normal lecture mode, whatever you're doing in the other course. Experiment. I know you think of your laboratories as the places for experiments. Classrooms could be experimental laboratories as well. Think about it. Play with it. Convince yourself.
Can you give an example of active learning?
Yeah, so absolutely. So having clickers in the classroom and stop rather than a straight lecture, having students engage in clicker questions, or POGLE, process-oriented guided inquiry and learning, where the students are solving a problem throughout a thread throughout the entire semester, and there's very little lecturing. Team-based learning, inquiry-based learning. Actually, I've got a continuum here. We'll have a whole bunch of things. But it doesn't have to be some big, complex thing. It could be as simple as 1-minute papers. It could be as straightforward as think, pair, share, which, by the way, we did when we talked about the definition of learning. We've actually got another nice little demo coming up for you here pretty soon as well. So that's what I mean by active learning, where students are actively engaged with one another and the professor to engage in the material, to better understand it, to demonstrate their knowledge of it. Great question. Thank you for asking. All right. I don't know if you've seen this or not. Huge meta-analysis by Scott Freeman, published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. I know it's too small for you to see. A really important study that comes out in 2014. It's all about STEM. Looks at a meta-analysis of 225 research studies that have investigated active learning versus lecture-based. Wow. So here's what he said. I'm going to let you read it. This is pretty remarkable. Especially the first sentence. The rest of it's good, don't get me wrong, but the first sentence is remarkable. We have evidence from people who are doing research as STEM faculty members in STEM that tells us that active learning strategies have disproportionate benefits for female students in male-dominated fields and disadvantaged students. That's remarkable. So, let's talk about other populations. White, male, upper-middle-class students who come from families who expect them to go on to get an education. Guess what? They do well pretty much no matter what. Okay? If you want to look at the data, let's look at the data. But if you want to help disadvantaged students, students who are female majors in male-dominated fields, active learning has disproportionate benefits. It doesn't hurt white male students. It helps female students. It helps disadvantaged students. That's remarkable. Why? You know what? Because I'll give you my quickest answer. It's really complicated. My quickest answer is there are folks from different backgrounds who aren't prepped educationally, academically, culturally for success in our system. So if you're a first-generation college student, if you come from an underrepresented minority, if you're from a low-income family, there may not be the structures in place that help that student be successful.
That's a vague answer.
It's a,
You need
Why
more
would it
specific.
matter whether you're a white or a black to understand thermodynamics? I'm not convinced why.
I would love to have that conversation with you.
I mean,
But
you can say that somebody is coming better prepared.
it's not just about white versus black. It's a combination.
If somebody, if you can say that maybe the white students are coming better prepared, then I could understand, but I cannot put
It's more than more
the racial.
But it's not just race. It's also income status. It's also gender. It's also cultural. Yeah. No, it's a great question. It's
Why
a,
would somebody grasp something better than the other?
because
it has to be
if
economical or some other type of description.
let me give you one quick example. If you are a Hispanic female and you want to go to college and you are living at home and you are an excellent student in high school, but every time you go home, your parents are teasing you, why are you wasting time in school? How come you're not helping us with our family business? How come you're wasting time doing that thing? If you don't have the social support structures in place, you could be the smartest, brightest student and not succeed. It's not about intelligence alone.
So you're talking about more important part of it is emotional support. Whether
Absolutely.
they have money or not.
Yeah.
So is it more like having a mentor with the classroom, they feel mentored versus?
That could make a huge difference. Mentoring, advising, lots of great data about, that could make a huge difference in student success. We all intuitively know this, right? We have known sharp, bright, amazing people, undergrads, graduate, family friends, who could do well, who are amazingly intelligent, but did not succeed in higher education. It's not only about intelligence.
Like Bill Gates?
He seems to have landed on his feet. Seemed to do pretty well. J.R. Simplot seemed to figure it out after a while without a high school education. Yeah, it's not, so it's a great question, and it's an icky, sticky, complicated, complex thing on helping students succeed. And it's an awesome question. Thank you.
Is it universal? Can you expand it to another country, what you said?
I will tell you this, I am not, but I would guess yes. But if you ask me about the data about that, I can't produce that.
Yes, we have. Example, for example, India, we have a caste system, as you all know. People from lower caste, they find it difficult performing in STE because they don't have proper support. It's not about only the income, it's about the mentality of the family.
So social status is more of that.
Yes, social status also plays a
But there's a whole bunch of things. If you went back to my earlier list, it's socioeconomic, it's cultural, racial, ethnic, gender. Male nursing students face some of the same challenges because that's a female-dominated field. Yeah, please.
If you don't really feel that you belong in the group, you're just watching a lecture, get the idea that everybody else in the room understands what's going on, and as soon as you start interacting with other students, you go, hey, wait a minute, there are a lot of other people in this room that are also confused about this. I'm not the right one.
Absolutely. That sense of community, if you want to retain your students, one of the biggest things the research tells us, a sense of community, that students feel like they're a part of something, that they belong. It's a huge thing in helping the student be successful in college and beyond. Please, Harvey.
Now, I understand the disadvantaged folks and so on and so forth, but underrepresented in terms of being a minority, I've seen, and I'm coming from a different background, I'm not a native, but I've seen it in other countries as well as even in this country that you see minorities that do even better because simply they want to prove themselves. You see minorities who don't do well.
Right.
So that comes from the culture, whether it promotes education or not, too, as well as, being a minority, not feeling part of the group makes a difference. But and there was a book that published by, I guess, a faculty about Harvard, linked with someone at Yale, a lady at Yale, that there are minorities in this country that do better than any majority.
Absolutely.
Chinese, Indian,
Absolutely.
Persians.
So for a psychologist, this is an awesome conversation to have, I got to tell you. But it tells you about the multi-variable, multifaceted complexity of this. It's not a one fix. This is not a one-size-fits-all. And so some people from a minority status overcome those odds and do well. And so there are always success stories. You can talk about Bill Gates and you can talk about J.R. Simplot. Is not finishing their formal education, tended to land on their feet. Generally speaking, if you look at the averages, for example, income in the United States about people who don't finish high school versus finish high school, some college, finish college, generally speaking, there's a linear relationship. The higher the educational attainment, the more potential for income you can make. Great discussion. And one more, and then we'll keep going. This is just 2014, so it's in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. And then this other guy, and thank you, because I'm going to use that as my segue. This other guy, Carl Wieman, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist, published a commentary about that paper. By the way, Carl Wieman will be at Boise State in April, and you'll have a chance to hear him speak twice. It was an evening conversation, and the next day at a teaching institute, a teaching conference. And so anyway, so one of the things I want to mention here is that sometimes people worry about, well, if I use all these active learning techniques, I'm going to water down the rigor of my course. More people passing may not be a better thing. Okay, well, if it's still as rigorous and more people pass, that sounds like it's pretty good. And here's Carl Wieman's take on it. And he's actually talking about the study I just mentioned to you. So failure rates in those STEM classes went from 34% to 22% with active learning. People still fail with active learning. 22% are still failing with active. So active learning is not a panacea. It's not mystical, magical. It doesn't make everybody learn the same and be successful. But it significantly helps. And you can actually look at failure rates in terms of course grades or independent concept tests. And you can see people are still failing concept tests. It's not a panacea. You can be rigorous with your assessment, what you want your students to know and be able to do, and still integrate active learning techniques, if you choose to, that may have some benefit for some of your students. That's what the data are telling us. At least that's my interpretation. Data, you get to
But again, is
interpret
it showing because of emotional support more than anything? Because you said it's only for this other class's students. It's not for the
Well, no, actually, I didn't say it's only for the other.
No, but you said it didn't make any difference for them.
Yeah,
So is it more of an emotional, because there's more interaction in the classroom?
but see, you're trying to nail me into one variable. I think it's
I'm just trying to get an idea
18
why they
variables.
think it worked.
Yeah, and there's multiple
Is it
explanations.
misleading this data, that this data is correct, but is it misleading the reasons why it's correct?
Well, the best thing I can encourage you to do is read the original paper and decide for yourself. I'm giving you my spin on it. Absolutely. But I would encourage you to.
Well, I was actually asking you what the paper conclusion was.
Here's Carl Wieman's conclusion. I'll let you read his conclusion. If there were, complex human problems require complex human solutions. That's why psychologists have job security, by the way. There's not a one quick fix. There's not one variable. If we just tweak this one variable a little bit, boom, we have better retention, better performance. Our students are making more money as they graduate. It's a complicated series, and it involves curricular, co-curricular. It's big and ugly and complex and cool and fascinating all at the same time.
So have they tested these students 2 months after the exercise?
That's a great. I have no idea. I have no idea. But I would gently encourage you. Figure it out. Test your students 2 months after your course. Okay, well, all right. Good for you. All right, so here's that continuum I promised you of active learning strategies. And odds are, most faculty members in this room are already doing something like this, okay, which is awesome, which is great. And there's a continuum from simple and relatively easy to more complex. Some are high-tech, some are low-tech. You can play with these ideas where you want to. Have you seen these map cards? Have you played with these? I really want to do this with you. We're kind of running out of time. I don't want to keep you past 1 o'clock. You want to try these?
Yeah,
Sure.
All right. So I need to probably put yourselves in groups of, over here 5 to 6, and probably over here 2 to 3 to 4. I have a 10-item multiple choice exam quiz waiting for you. I'm going to show you items one at a time. I want you to discuss amongst yourselves. When you think you've got the answer as a team, scratch it off. If you are correct, there'll be a star or an asterisk where you scratched. If you're incorrect, it'll be blank. Boy, I hope I did this well. All right, you ready? Here's the first one. So now, if we had taken this seriously, which we didn't, which is fine, you could tally up the number of scratches it took you to find the 10 correct answers. And truly, the moral to the story is you could use this as a relatively low-tech active learning. Not only are you reviewing the material, but also it got you talking to one another. And guess what? If you've got that overconfident student in that group and they know everything, and all of a sudden you start scratching and they don't know everything, you are helping them with that overconfidence problem. You are also building teamwork, communication skills, problem solving, decision making. There's lots of really cool things wrapped up into what this silly little thing looks like. You want to play with this? Go over to the Center of Teaching and Learning. They'll give them to you for nothing. Yes, please.
Was the error in requesting on purpose?
Say again?
Was the error requested on purpose?
The error, I am responsible for all errors. Was it on purpose? No. And I can point you to a place on the internet that says that answer for question 5 is the answer for question 5. Clearly, I'm not an engineer, but I went to the internet so I could act like one. Right? So there were no purposeful errors. But thank you for thinking that. I actually take that as a compliment. Just a couple last thoughts, because I want to finish on time for you. Big, massive organizations have been looking at this for a long time. They've been looking at the data and collecting them and publishing reports. Maybe you've heard of the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and they came up with a long time ago these high-impact practices. Luckily, at Boise State, we've been doing these high-impact practices for a long time. Here's a very quick listing of them. Things like a capstone course, writing intensive, diversity and global learning, learning communities, first-year seminars, undergraduate research. So we've been doing a lot of these for a long time. And so our tradition is putting us in a good place to be able to provide those experiences for our students that we know from the data will help them be successful. This comes from Derek Ruff at Vanderbilt University. So a model that's emerging now is that students are not just consumers of information in our classes, they're producers of it. They're creators, they're designers, they're researchers. They're scholars in the best, purest sense of the word. And so to actively engage our students to do these things. There's a long tradition of this in engineering, and I actually pulled examples from ME and ECE for you. You've got ASE, you've got the Journal of Engineering Education. I'm speaking to the choir here. You guys know this better than I do. And so here you can go to the literature, and you can find things in your field that are specific to mechanical, or specific to electrical. You can go into the literature and read about these teaching innovations and the data. And you can decide for yourself. You can look at the data and make your own determinations as to what might be the cause and effect outcomes of these things. here's one more from the Journal of Engineering Education. So there's all kinds of resources. And for some folks, that's what they prefer. They prefer to actually go into the literature and explore this. For other folks, you'd rather walk down the hall. And you'd rather talk to your colleagues about it. Maybe you're sharing a teaching concern. Maybe you're talking about, I just can't get students to read the material before they come to class. Or how come I'm having a lousy Blackboard discussion and everybody's just posting the bare minimum number of words? Or some other teaching strategy that you're trying to figure out how to get students to do something differently or better. And so a great way to do that is talk to your colleagues. In fact, that's what this Wider Persist is all about on this campus. And the College of Engineering, the College of Arts and Sciences, they're both deeply involved in Wider Persist. And so there's a website if you want to find out more about it. I wanted to share it with you. And if I could click on FAST Team, which I could click right there, which is just a static image. I really didn't click on it, sorry. Every department, including the 5 STEM departments in your college, actually has a faculty advocate for STEM transformation. In fact, the person who's leading that effort for Wider Persist is Karen Vescovic, who's right up there in the corner. She didn't even know she was going to be in today's slide presentation. And so you have folks, and actually you can see the listing of the current FAST team members. So these are folks who are helping us with this NSF grant that Amy mentioned at the very beginning of my talk to just help these conversations happen. You know, it's one thing for, I could tell you, okay, now go do a literature search and find 10 articles. Or you can just have a conversation with your colleagues. And they may be able to provide some resources, some places to look, or some conferences to think about going to that might have some teaching sessions. And so these are the folks who are College of Arts and Sciences, College of Engineering, who are really helping to facilitate these discussions. Some of you on this list are in this room. That's awesome. Thanks for coming. All right, we're really, that's actually exactly 1 o'clock. I will stay and answer questions, cajole, debate, discuss. This is important stuff. I'm so glad that you engaged with it. Thank you for not being a passive audience and just sitting back and, is this going to be on the test? I actually appreciate the interaction. It's healthier for all of us to have this. Any quick last, I know it's 1 o'clock. Yes, sir.
I know that one of the things that I hear people complain about when they talk about, well, I changed all this and I changed my assessment, and now the students are doing better, right? So the immediate thing that people say is, well, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that instead of giving the final exam that covered the entire course the way I used to do it, I've now reduced the content of the course, and so now I'm giving the final exam over half the material that I used to cover. So I'm covering less material, therefore the students are doing better.
Yeah, so my personal advice, which you might not care about, never reduce rigor. Never reduce rigor. Be as rigorous as you need to be in your discipline. So it's not about lowering the standard. It's about.
But I don't necessarily mean the standard.
So, or by teaching less.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to make that decision.
Absolutely.
To teach too much.
Yeah. I've been doing this 26 years now total, and every semester I teach less and less. And I figure out students don't have to read every chapter in the book. They don't have to memorize and regurgitate every term. But you all figure that out by your own practice and time and conversations with colleagues.
One quick comment is I started applying a relatively low-tech interactive method. At the very beginning, I realized I was teaching this, but after a few years of practicing, now I realize I'm teaching even more than before. Slightly more, not too much, but slightly more than before.
Yeah, and it's definitely, there's a trade-off, and so there's a learning curve for everything. Even the if-at cards, there's a little bit of a learning curve. And so, but if you can get to that, eventually if you get to that place where your students are doing as well or better, all of your students, and you're more satisfied, that's a good thing to happen. And sometimes it might not even be about learning gains, but it might be about retention in the major. It might be persistence to their degree. So their grades might not be changing, but they feel better about what they're learning. They feel, so there could be non-grade related benefits, what we would call non-cognitive. So emotional benefits. Yes, sir, please.
Do you have data from your own deployment?
Yeah, I do.
So what kind of things can you analyze?
Okay, so I'll give you one example. So years ago I did a study. I was sick and tired of students emphasizing points. because I had my own students doing this grade grubbing thing. I'm sure engineering students don't do this. But over in psychology, well, I've got an 89.99%. I just need one more point, So I did this study one semester where, and I asked for student volunteers. I said, you can be in one of two conditions. Either the regular straight, I'm going to grade everything like that, or I'm going to give you all the feedback that I would a normal student, but I'm never going to tell you your points all semester long. At the end of the semester, your grade's going to pop up on Bronco App. Okay? So they get all the feedback. So if they write a paper, they got all the feedback any other student would get, but they didn't get an 89 at the top of the paper. They just got the feedback. Okay? And so first off, there was no significant difference in the students in either condition in terms of their overall grades. So my little intervention didn't hurt anybody, but the students who were in the no feedback condition loved it. And they started saying things like, I wish more faculty members would do this. And actually, I got a paper out of it, so I published it in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. So I'm really walking the walk and talking the talk. I do this for a living. And so your classroom can be your experimental laboratory.
Not only that, Eric will come experiment on your classroom.
Well, but only with IRB approval. So I mean, we have some steps. And there's just all kinds of things that, as an instructor, I can't imagine that you're teaching the perfect class in the perfect way using the perfect amount of time. And I wouldn't suggest big major changes, but what's the one thing? Do you want your students to engage more in discussions in class? Do you want your students to come to class better prepared for the day? Do you want them to do better on a cumulative final exam? What I tell my colleagues is that just focus on one thing and look for a solution. And don't try 18 different changes all at once, especially in your second semester teaching. It's okay to take your time and do this. Yes, please.
One question, in your experience, we've gone from teaching 3 times a week to 2 times a week. Is that better or worse?
There's a little bit of data in the literature, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember it. And I don't know if it's engineering specific. I'll be honest. And so some people like the 3 days, 50 minutes. There's actually more chances for repetition during a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. For other folks, 50 minutes just isn't quite enough, and they feel like it's choppy. It feels like I've got to restart and restop so many times, and so there's a little bit of literature, but I don't know if it's engineering specific. Well, I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But I would help you find it.
I thought you had said earlier that it's better to spread it out.
Well, but he was asking a specific question about 3 days a week, 50 minutes versus twice a week, 75. That's a very short-term example. It would be better once a month, no matter what. It's to come back to an assessment of information once a month, regardless if it's the number of meeting times you have.
The university is mandated that it's going to be an hour and 15 minutes twice a week.
That's not actually quite true. You can still teach Monday, Wednesday,
Do we
Friday.
have any courses offered on Wednesday, Friday at 50 minutes?
I have no idea.
Okay, I think the answer is no.
No, but actually there's Monday, Wednesday, Friday math courses that are 4 credits.
Oh, okay.
But I think the rule is, and I could be 100%
Oh,
wrong
but
here.
they're now, it's still an hour and
The
15.
rule is you have to start on the time.
Yeah, but you're at the end of it.
No, you can take Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Right now they're set up Monday, Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday, Friday morning. There's nothing that says you can't teach Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning. Let them out early, but you can't start at an off hour. I think that's the rule.
Yeah, so you got to start at 9 or 10:30 or noon or
But with the
1:30.
new timing business, that would be more efficient use of the time.
Well, that's an interesting question because you go back to the literature on how people learn. The boom, 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 boom. I'm doing Calc 3 and now I'm doing, well, they should be related. And now I'm doing English 101, right? You're actually, some time to process is actually good for the students.
So
Back to
you're
back
saying that
process.
they're going to set up 15 minutes to classes at 25 minutes?
Right. Or you give them extra amount of your time. Teach for an hour 15.
15-minute slot,
Right.
but you use it 3 days a week for 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So they have more time after the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah. But you're not wasting a section. That's how we're all fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So what about in terms of the class sizes?
Huh?
What does the science of learning say about?
So class size is another big complicated thing. Generally speaking, it's easier to do active learning techniques in smaller classes. Having said that, some active learning techniques are maximized for large classes. So I've used clickers in a class of 225 students.
Good, but
I have.
ask this question. Differentiate what I hear that they're teaching 100 plus. So,
Yeah, but that one I can't answer for you. I've taught statistics to 240 students.
well, statistically, depends on the course, as you said.
I think it would depend on the course, the instructor, the support of teaching assistants you might have to do that. I don't know the software they use for DiffEQ. I think there's a whole bunch of factors in there that could make it worth experimenting with. I know, you got to go. You got stuff to do. Anything else? Last? Yes, sir. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, you're welcome.